God, who invited her? The sharp whisper of a white woman cuts through the chatter, her eyes locked on Amara, poised yet isolated at the class reunion. The room hums with nostalgia as a massive screen descends, flashing memories of James and Claire. Prom nights, wild parties, stolen kisses. Laughter erupts, warm and wistful. Then Claire, with a venomous smile, flips to a slide. Amara's face, crudely edited, plastered with, "Where'd she come from?" and mocking emojis. Another slide sneers at Amara's charity event photo. Thinks she belongs here? The crowd freezes, some snickering, others stunned. Will Amara crumble or rise? What's your guess for this story's twist? Drop your thoughts, hit that subscribe button, and share where you're tuning in from. Day or night? The hum of the Tesla Model S was a low, electric hymn as James Carver gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening against the polished leather. Highway 101 stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt slicing through California's golden dusk, leading toward the small suburban town where his past waited like an unopened letter. At 38, James was a Silicon Valley titan, his tech empire a gleaming monument to ambition. Yet tonight, his heart thudded with something heavier than success: dread. Beside him, Amara sat with her hands folded, her dark eyes tracing the fleeting silhouettes of eucalyptus trees against the fading sky. Her presence, elegant in a tailored blazer, felt like a silent challenge to the world they were about to enter. The class reunion loomed, a 20-year echo of a life James had outrun, or so he thought. Old friends would see him as the man who had it all: a sprawling estate, a private jet's worth of stock options, and Amara, his wife of 3 years, a brilliant black human rights lawyer whose poise could silence a room. But the truth gnawed at him. Their marriage, born from a pact between close-knit families, was a contract of duty, not passion. He loved Amara's mind, her fire, but a chasm stretched between them, one he couldn't name. Was it his own unspoken biases? The weight of others' stares? He pushed the thought away, his jaw tightening. "You okay?" Amara's voice was soft but piercing, cutting through the hum of the car. She'd noticed the tension in his grip, the way his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror as if checking for ghosts. "Fine," James said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just, been a while since I've seen these people." Amara nodded, turning to the window. Her reflection flickered against the glass, her smooth brown skin catching the last glints of sunlight. She knew James hadn't wanted her to come. He hadn't said it, but she felt it in the way he'd hesitated when she'd asked about the reunion, the way his voice caught when he'd said, "It'll be fine." She wasn't here for him tonight. She was here to prove she belonged in his world, even if it was only a facade. The town came into view, a cluster of low-slung buildings and neon signs that hadn't changed since James was a teenager, sneaking beers behind the gas station. The high school loomed ahead, its brick facade glowing under floodlights, balloons bobbing at the entrance like relics of a simpler time. James parked the Tesla, its sleek lines absurd against the backdrop of rusty pickups and minivans. Amara stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement, her emerald dress catching the light. She was a vision, but James felt the weight of eyes already sizing them up. Inside the gymnasium was a time capsule. Banners screamed 20-year reunion in garish red, and a 90s pop anthem blared, tugging at memories of sweaty dances and whispered secrets. James scanned the room, his pulse quickening. Faces he hadn't seen in decades grinned back, some weathered, some Botox smooth. Hands clapped his shoulder, voices booming with, "Look at you, Carver!" and "Tech King, huh?" But their eyes slid to Amara, lingering a beat too long, their smiles tightening with unspoken questions. Amara felt it too. She stood tall, her chin lifted, but the air was thick with judgment. She was used to it. The sidelong glances at corporate galas, the murmured assumptions about how she'd landed James. But tonight, in this small-town gym, the scrutiny felt sharper, like a blade pressed to her skin. She looped her arm through James's, a silent claim, but his stiffness betrayed him. He was already slipping back into this world, one where she was an outsider. James! Oh my God! A voice sliced through the noise, bright and syrupy. Claire emerged from the crowd, a vision in a white dress that hugged her curves, her blonde hair cascading like a Hollywood starlet's. She threw her arms around James, her perfume sharp and floral. Look at you, still breaking hearts? James laughed, a nervous edge to it, his eyes darting to Amara. Hey, Claire, it's good to see you. Claire's gaze flicked to Amara, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. And this must be Amara, my wife, James said, his voice catching on the word. He cleared his throat. Amara, this is Claire, from back in the day. Charmed, Claire said, extending a hand, her grip limp and her eyes cold. So nice to meet James's better half. Amara's smile was steel. Likewise. She felt the room shift, conversations dipping as heads turned. Claire was the sun here, her radiance pulling everyone into orbit. Amara was the anomaly, the one who didn't fit the script. The night pressed on, a blur of small talk and forced laughter. Claire flitted through the crowd, her voice ringing with stories of prom kings and late-night bonfires, each one starring her and James. Amara sipped her wine, her fingers tight around the stem, as old classmates recounted tales that excluded her. She was a lawyer who'd argued before judges, yet here she was reduced to a shadow in James's story. Then Claire seized the microphone, her voice cutting through the music. All right, everyone, let's have some fun, she chirped, her eyes glinting with something darker. I've put together a little trip down memory lane. Ready? The crowd cheered as a screen descended, its glow casting long shadows. Images flickered. James and Claire at prom, arms entwined. James tossing a football, Claire cheering. The room buzzed with nostalgia, laughter spilling like champagne. Amara's chest tightened, but she kept her face composed, even as James leaned closer to the screen, his eyes soft with memory. Then the slide changed. Amara's breath caught. Her face stared back, stolen from a social media post, crudely photoshopped with garish filters. Where'd she come from? Blared the text, paired with laughing emojis. The crowd stilled, a few chuckles breaking the silence. Another slide followed. Amara at a charity gala, her proud smile mocked with the caption, Thinks she belongs here? The air turned to ice. Amara's pulse roared in her ears, her hands trembling. She looked at James, waiting for him to stand, to say something, anything. But he sat frozen, his face pale, his lips parting in a weak, Claire? What the hell? Claire's laugh was light, venomous. Oh, come on, it's just a joke. Amara, you're not offended, right? You're used to standing out. The room spun. Amara's throat burned, but she refused to break. She stood, her chair scraping loudly, and walked out, the weight of every stare pressing into her back. James called after her, his voice faint, but she didn't turn. The gym doors slammed shut, and the California night swallowed her, leaving only the echo of laughter and the sting of betrayal. Amara's heels echoed in the empty hallway, each step a sharp retort to the laughter still ringing in her ears. The high school's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting her shadow long and jagged against the tiled floor. Her chest heaved, not from exertion, but from the fury and shame clawing at her heart. Claire's slides, those cruel, calculated jabs, played on a loop in her mind, each word a fresh cut. Where'd she come from? The mocking emojis, the crowd's stifled snickers, and worst of all, James's silence, heavy as a stone dropped into still water. She pushed open the door to the women's restroom, the cool air hitting her like a slap, and leaned against the sink, gripping its edge until her knuckles ached. Her reflection stared back, eyes fierce but shimmering with unshed tears. The emerald dress, chosen to make her feel powerful, now felt like a costume. She'd fought battles in courtrooms, faced down judges with steel in her spine. But this small-town gymnasium, this crowd of strangers who saw her as an intruder, had unraveled her. She pressed her palms to her face, willing the tears away. You are not weak, she whispered to the mirror. You are not theirs to break. Back in the gym, the air had shifted, The crowd's buzz now a low hum of unease. James sat rigid, his tie suddenly too tight, Claire's laughter still echoing in his ears. Her joke had landed like a grenade, and he'd done nothing, nothing to shield Amara. Guilt churned in his gut, but so did something uglier, embarrassment. He'd seen the looks, the raised eyebrows, the whispers that followed Amara's exit. He hated himself for caring, but he did. Claire, oblivious or uncaring, was already working the room again, her smile a blade cloaked in charm. "James, lighten up," she said, sliding into the seat beside him, her perfume cloying. "It was just a bit of fun. She'll get over it." He turned to her, his voice low, strained. "That wasn't fun, Claire. That was cruel." Claire's eyes widened, mock innocence dripping from her. "Oh, come on. Everyone's having a good time. Don't let her make a scene." Her words stung, but not as much as his inaction. He should have stood up, called out Claire's venom, pulled Amara close. Instead, he'd sat there, paralyzed by the weight of old loyalties and new fears. He pushed back his chair, ignoring Claire's pout, and headed for the hallway, his heart pounding with the need to find his wife. Amara in the restroom splashed cold water on her face, the shock grounding her. She straightened, smoothing her dress, and made a choice. She wouldn't let Claire's pettiness define her. She wouldn't give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing her broken. She'd go back, head high, and face them all. Not for James, but for herself. She took a deep breath, the air sharp in her lungs, and pushed open the door. The hallway wasn't empty. A man leaned against the wall, his dark suit crisp, but his posture relaxed, a faint smile playing on his lips. Marcus. She hadn't seen him in years, not since their high school days when he'd been the quiet kid with a sharp wit, always dodging the same taunts she'd endured tonight. Now he was taller, broader, with the easy confidence of someone who'd carved his path. A journalist she'd heard, one who'd broken stories that shook city halls. "Amara," he said, his voice warm, like a hearth after a long night. "You okay?" She hesitated, her defenses still up. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just needed a moment." He nodded, his eyes searching hers, seeing through the lie. "I saw what happened in there. Claire hasn't changed a bit, has she?" Amara's laugh was brittle, but it softened under his gaze. "No, she's still the queen of this little kingdom." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. "She's only queen if you let her be. You don't owe these people anything, Amara. Not their approval, not their comfort." His words landed like a lifeline. She wanted to brush them off, to keep her armor intact. But the sincerity in his eyes cracked something open. "It's not just Claire," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's James. He just sat there." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak, her words spilling out, the humiliation of the slides, the sting of James's silence, the weight of always feeling like she had to prove herself in his world. Marcus listened, his presence steady, grounding. When she finished, he sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "I get it," he said. "Back in the day, Claire and her crew made my life hell. Poor black kid with secondhand clothes? I was their favorite target. But you know what I learned? They lash out because they're scared. Scared of anyone who doesn't fit their neat little boxes." Amara nodded, her throat tight. "I just thought maybe James would be different tonight." Marcus's eyes softened. "He might still surprise you, but you don't need him to validate who you are." Their conversation was cut short by footsteps. James appeared at the end of the hallway, his face a mix of guilt and urgency. "Amara," he said, his voice rough. "Can we talk?" She straightened, her resolve hardening. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Marcus stepped back, giving her space but staying close, a silent ally. James's eyes flicked to him, a flash of something, jealousy, crossing his face before he focused on Amara. "I messed up," he said. "I should have said something. I didn't expect Claire to pull that." "Didn't expect it?" Amara's voice was sharp, cutting through the air. "Or didn't want to deal with it? You let her humiliate me, James, in front of everyone." He flinched, his hands rising as if to reach for her, then falling. I'm sorry. I froze. I didn't know how to. You didn't try, she snapped, her eyes blazing. You chose to stay comfortable. The words hung between them, heavy and final. The hallway felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken truths. Marcus cleared his throat, breaking the tension. I'll let you two sort this out, he said, his voice calm but firm. Amara, I'm around if you need me. She nodded, grateful for his presence, and watched him walk back toward the gym. James stepped closer, his voice low. Can we go back in? Together? Amara looked at him, searching his face for something. Strength, conviction, love. She found only regret, and it wasn't enough. I'm going back, she said, her voice steady, but not for you. She turned, her heels clicking with purpose, and walked toward the gym. The doors loomed ahead, the music and chatter spilling out like a challenge. She wasn't the girl who'd fled minutes ago. She was Amara, and she'd face this room, these people, on her terms. James followed, a step behind, his silence louder than any apology. Amara pushed through the gymnasium doors, the swell of music and chatter crashing over her like a wave. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and nostalgia, but she held her head high, her emerald dress catching the light as if daring the room to look away. The crowd's eyes followed her, some curious, others laced with guilt from Claire's cruel display. She felt their gazes but refused to shrink. This wasn't their story to write. She moved toward the bar, her steps deliberate, each one a reclaiming of the space she'd been denied. James trailed behind, his presence a shadow she couldn't shake. His apology still echoed in her mind, weak, incomplete. But it was his silence during Claire's attack that cut deeper. She ordered a glass of Pinot Noir, the bartender's nod a small anchor in the storm. As she sipped, the wine's tart edge steadied her, grounding her resolve. She wouldn't let this night define her. Across the room, Claire held court, her laughter bright and brittle, surrounded by a cluster of old friends. Her white dress glowed under the lights, a beacon of untouchable confidence. But Amara caught the flicker of unease in her glances. Claire knew she'd crossed a line, yet her smile never wavered. It was a performance, one Amara had no intention of applauding. Amara! A voice broke through her thoughts, warm and familiar. Marcus approached, a glass of bourbon in hand, his smile a quiet rebellion against the room's tension. You came back. Good for you. She returned his smile, the knot in her chest loosening. Had to. Can't let them think they won. He chuckled, leaning against the bar. That's the Amara I remember, always tougher than the rest of us. The compliment landed softly, a balm to her bruised pride. They fell into easy conversation, reminiscing about high school days, study sessions in the library, dodging Claire's clique, the rare moments of defiance that had bonded them. Marcus's stories of his journalism career, exposing corruption in city halls, sparked something in Amara. His passion mirrored her own fight for justice, a reminder of who she was beyond this suffocating reunion. But the room wasn't done with her. A hush fell as Claire's voice rang out again, this time laced with mock sincerity. Everyone, let's raise a glass, she called, holding up her champagne flute. To old friends, new beginnings, and forgiving little misunderstandings. The crowd murmured, glasses clinking, but the word misunderstandings hung like a taunt. Amara's grip tightened on her glass, her pulse quickening. Claire's eyes met hers across the room, a challenge wrapped in a smile. Marcus leaned closer, his voice low. She's baiting you. Don't give her the satisfaction. I know, Amara said, her voice steady but fierce. But I'm done playing her game. She set her glass down and moved toward the center of the room, her heels clicking with purpose. The crowd parted, sensing the shift in the air. James, standing near Claire, stiffened, his eyes wide with apprehension. Amara stopped a few feet from Claire, her gaze unflinching. Claire, she began, her voice clear, cutting through the music. Your little misunderstanding was no accident. You wanted to humiliate me, and you used your power here to do it. The room went silent, the weight of her words pinning everyone in place. Claire's smile faltered, her champagne flute trembling slightly. Amara, don't be dramatic, she said, her voice tight, It was just a joke. You're making this about something it's not. A joke? Amara's laugh was sharp, laced with fire. You mocked my existence in front of everyone. You don't get to call that a joke and walk away. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. A few of Claire's friends exchanged glances, their loyalty wavering. Amara pressed on, her voice rising with conviction. I've spent years fighting for people who've been silenced, people you'd never deign to notice. I don't need your approval, Claire, or anyone's here, but I'm not invisible, and I won't let you pretend I am. The words landed like a thunderclap. Marcus, still at the bar, gave her a subtle nod, his eyes bright with pride. A few classmates clapped hesitantly, the sound growing as others joined. Claire's face flushed, her composure cracking. You're blowing this out of proportion, she snapped, her voice shrill. James, tell her. Enough, James said, his voice low but firm, stepping forward. The room turned to him, surprised by his interruption. Amara's heart skipped, a flicker of hope igniting, but his eyes were clouded with conflict. Claire, you went too far. This stops now. Claire blinked, stunned, her mouth opening to retort, but no words came. James turned to Amara, his expression raw. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. The apology was a step, but it came too late to mend the fracture. Amara nodded, her eyes hard. You should have, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned away, walking back to Marcus, the crowd's murmurs fading into the background. Claire, humiliated, stormed toward the exit, her heels clacking furiously. The music resumed, but the mood had shifted. The room was now split between those who admired Amara's courage and those clinging to old allegiances. Marcus handed her a fresh glass of wine, his smile warm. That was something else, he said. You just rewrote the script for this place. Amara took the glass, her hand steadier now. I had to. For me. They clinked glasses, a quiet toast to resilience. But James's gaze followed her, heavy with regret. He approached, hesitating at the edge of their circle. Amara, can we talk? Alone? She looked at him, the man she'd vowed to stand beside, now a stranger in this moment of truth. Not now, James, she said, her voice firm. I need space. He nodded, his shoulders slumping, and retreated into the crowd. Marcus didn't push, but his presence was a steady anchor. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of triumphs and scars, their laughter a defiance of the pain that had brought them here. For the first time that evening, Amara felt seen, not as James's wife, not as an outsider, but as herself. As the reunion wound down, classmates began to leave, some offering Amara quiet words of support, others avoiding her gaze. She stepped outside, the cool California night wrapping around her like a promise. Marcus followed, his jacket slung over his shoulder. You heading back to the city? He asked. Yeah, she said, glancing at the Tesla parked under a street lamp, James already waiting by it. But I'm not sure what back means anymore. Marcus nodded, understanding more than she'd said. If you ever need a friend, Amara, you know where to find me. She smiled genuinely this time. I do. As she walked toward the car, James's silhouette loomed, a question mark against the stars. The drive home would be silent, she knew, but the weight of tonight's truce would follow them, demanding answers neither was ready to give. Amara climbed into the passenger seat, her heart heavy but unbroken, the first sparks of a new path flickering within her. The Tesla's engine hummed softly as James steered onto Highway 101, the night swallowing the small town behind them. Amara stared out the window, the stars blurring into streaks of light, her mind replaying the gymnasium's chaos. Claire's venom, the crowd's divided stares, Marcus's steady presence. James's apology, belated and brittle, lingered like a bruise. The silence between them was a chasm, wider now than ever, filled with words neither dared to speak. Amara's hands rested in her lap, her fingers tracing the hem of her emerald dress, its elegance now a reminder of a night she'd fought to survive. James's grip on the wheel was tight, his eyes fixed on the road. He wanted to speak, to bridge the gap, but every phrase he rehearsed in his head felt hollow. Amara, he started, his voice rough. I know I screwed up back there. I should have stopped Claire sooner. Amara's gaze didn't shift. Sooner? She said, her tone sharp but controlled. You should have stopped her the moment she turned that screen on. But you didn't. You let me stand there alone. He flinched, the truth cutting deeper than he'd expected. I didn't know how to handle it, he admitted. It was Claire, my past. It threw me. I wasn't ready for that. Ready? Amara turned to him now, her eyes blazing in the dim glow of the dashboard. James, I've been ready for this my whole life. Every room I walk into, I'm ready for the stares, the whispers, the jokes. But I thought you, my husband, would have my back. Her words landed like blows, each one heavy with the weight of their fractured marriage. James opened his mouth, then closed it, his mind scrambling for something to salvage this. I'm trying, Amara. I'm not perfect. Trying isn't enough when I'm the one paying the price, she said, her voice breaking for the first time. She turned back to the window, the conversation dying in the air. The rest of the drive passed in silence, the hum of the car a mocking contrast to the storm within. At home, their sleek San Francisco loft felt sterile, its glass walls reflecting the city's lights but offering no warmth. Amara kicked off her heels, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. She moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, needing something to anchor her. James lingered in the doorway, his tie loosened, his face a map of regret and frustration. Amara, please, he said, stepping closer. Let's talk about this. Talk. She set the glass down, her hands trembling slightly. What's there to talk about, James? You showed me who you are tonight. You chose to stay comfortable, to let Claire tear me down because it was easier than standing up. That's not fair, he snapped, his voice rising. I'm not Claire. I don't think like her. I was caught off guard, okay? I didn't know how to navigate that room. Amara's laugh was bitter, cutting through the quiet. Navigate? You're a CEO, James. You navigate boardrooms, investors, and crises. But when it's me, when it's us, you freeze? That's not being caught off guard. That's choosing not to fight for me. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, his polished exterior cracking. You think I don't fight for you? I've built everything for us. This life, this home, this life, Amara interrupted, her voice rising to match his. This life where I'm a prop in your success story? Where I have to smile through every gala, every who's she? Look, knowing you won't defend me when it counts. James stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. I don't see you as a prop, he said quietly. But maybe I haven't seen you enough. The admission hung between them, raw and unguarded. Amara's throat tightened, a flicker of hope battling the hurt. But it wasn't enough. Not tonight. I need time, James, she said, her voice steady despite the ache. I can't keep carrying this alone. She walked past him, heading for the guest room, her steps deliberate. The door closed softly, but it felt like a wall slamming shut. James stood alone in the living room, the city skyline mocking his solitude. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, the weight of his failures pressing down. The next morning, Amara woke early, the guest room's stark walls a reminder of the distance between them. She dressed quietly, her movements mechanical, and slipped out before James stirred. She needed air, space, something to quiet the storm in her chest. She drove to a cafe in the Mission District, its vibrant murals and chatter a stark contrast to the loft's cold elegance. There, over a steaming latte, she opened her phone and found a message from Marcus. Hey, just checking in, it read. Last night was rough, but you were incredible. Coffee soon. A small smile tugged at her lips. Marcus's words, simple and sincere, felt like sunlight after a long night. She typed a quick reply. Coffee sounds perfect. Name the time. And hit send, a spark of anticipation warming her. Days turned into weeks, and Amara threw herself into her work, arguing cases for marginalized communities, her passion a shield against the cracks in her marriage. She and James moved around each other like ghosts, polite but distant, their conversations clipped to necessities. The reunion had exposed fault lines neither could ignore, and Amara began to question whether love could survive without trust. Marcus became a constant, their coffee meetups evolving into long walks through Golden Gate Park, their conversations a tapestry of shared struggles and quiet triumphs. He spoke of his days as a cub reporter, facing newsrooms that doubted his place, and she shared her battles in courtrooms where her voice was often the only one like hers. Their connection wasn't rushed or reckless. It was a slow burn, built on understanding. One afternoon, as they sat on a park bench, the bay's breeze carrying the scent of salt and eucalyptus, Marcus turned to her. "You're stronger than you know, Amara," he said, his eyes steady. "But you don't have to carry it all alone." She looked at him, the weight of his words settling in her chest. "I've been carrying it so long, I don't know how to stop," she admitted. He reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. "You don't have to figure it out today, but I'm here." Amara's heart stirred, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. Back home, James noticed the change in her, the way her eyes lit up when she mentioned Marcus, the way her silences grew heavier. Jealousy gnawed at him, but so did guilt. He'd lost her, not to Marcus, but to his inaction. One evening, as Amara packed her briefcase for a late meeting, James stood in the doorway, his voice tentative. "Amara, can we try again? I'm willing to do the work, therapy, anything." She paused, her hand on the doorframe, her eyes searching his. "I don't know if I can trust you to show up for me, James," she said softly. "Not after everything." He nodded, the truth a bitter pill. "I'll wait," he said, "as long as it takes." Amara stepped into the night, her heart a tangle of hope and doubt. Marcus's words echoed in her mind, a promise of something new while James's plea lingered, a tether to a past she wasn't sure she could reclaim. The city's lights stretched before her, a map of choices yet to be made. Amara's footsteps echoed through the San Francisco dusk, the city's pulse a restless counterpoint to her own. The weight of James's words, "I'll wait," clung to her like damp fog, stirring a tangle of guilt and resolve. She slipped into her car, the engine's hum a fleeting comfort as she drove toward a community center in Oakland, where she was due to speak at a youth advocacy event. The road stretched ahead, much like her life now, a path splitting in directions she couldn't yet map. Marcus's steady presence, their shared laughter in the park, flickered in her mind, a contrast to the cold distance of her loft, where James's promises felt like echoes of a life unraveling. Inside the community center, the air buzzed with purpose. Young faces, mostly black and brown, looked up at her from folding chairs, their eyes bright with hope and defiance. Amara stood at the podium, her voice steady as she spoke of resilience, of fighting systems that tried to erase them. "You are enough," she told them, her words fierce. "Your voice, your story, it matters." The crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment she felt whole, her purpose a shield against the chaos of the reunion and the fracture in her marriage. Afterward, Marcus was there, waiting in the back, his smile a quiet beacon. "You were electric up there," he said, handing her a bottle of water. "Those kids won't forget that." She took the water, their fingers brushing, a spark of warmth in the cool evening. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "It means a lot." They walked to a nearby diner, its neon sign flickering against the night. Over coffee and greasy fries, they talked. About her speech, his latest exposé, the dreams they'd carried since high school. Marcus's ease, his way of listening without judgment, felt like a language she'd forgotten. "You ever think about what you'd do if you could start over?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Amara stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking softly. "All the time," she admitted, "but starting over means letting go, and I'm not sure I know how." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You don't have to decide now, but you deserve a life that feels like yours, Amara." The words settled deep, stirring a longing she'd buried under duty. She thought of James, his regret, his offer of therapy, a man trying to rebuild what he'd let crumble. But trust, once broken, wasn't easily mended. She looked at Marcus, his steady gaze a mirror to her strength, and felt a pull toward something new, something honest. Back home, James was waiting, the loft's silence louder than ever. He stood by the window, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop to his unease. You were out late, he said, his voice careful, not accusing, but searching. Work, Amara said, setting her bag down. A speech at the community center. He nodded, his eyes lingering on her. You're different lately. Stronger, maybe, but distant. She met his gaze, her heart heavy but resolute. I've had to be stronger, James, because you weren't there when I needed you. He winced, stepping closer. I know I failed you at the reunion. I see it now, how I let you down. But I'm trying to be better. I've been reading, thinking about the things I didn't understand before, about privilege, about what you face. I want to learn, Amara. For us. His sincerity caught her off guard, a flicker of the man she'd once hoped he could be. But it was tangled with memories of his silence, of Claire's laughter, of the weight she'd carried alone. I appreciate that, she said, her voice steady, but it's not just about learning. It's about showing up when it's hard. And you didn't. James's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. What does this mean for us? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Amara said honestly. I need time to figure out what I want, what I deserve. He nodded, the space between them vast despite their proximity. I meant what I said. I'll wait. Amara retreated to the guest room, the door's soft click a punctuation to their stalemate. Sleep eluded her, her mind a whirl of Marcus's warmth and James's regret. The next morning she woke to a text from Marcus. Got a lead on a story about community funding. Want to tag along? Could use your perspective. She smiled, typing a quick, I'm in, before heading to meet him. They spent the day in Oakland's neighborhoods, talking to activists and residents, their shared passion a thread pulling them closer. Marcus's questions were sharp, his notebook filled with stories of struggle and hope, and Amara found herself speaking with a fire she hadn't felt in months. By dusk, they sat on a stoop, the city's hum a backdrop to their laughter. You're good at this, Marcus said, his voice warm. Making people feel heard. It's a gift. You're not so bad yourself, she replied, her smile easy. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. Their shared history, their unspoken possibilities. Back at the loft, James was waiting again, his face a mix of hope and fear. Where were you today? He asked, his tone cautious. With Marcus, Amara said, no apology in her voice. Working on something that matters. James's jaw tightened, jealousy flaring. Marcus, he's been around a lot lately. Amara's eyes narrowed. He's been a friend, more than I can say for you at the reunion. The words stung, and James's voice rose, a rare crack in his composure. I'm trying to fix this, Amara, but you're pulling away, spending all your time with him? What am I supposed to think? You're supposed to trust me, she shot back. Like I trusted you to have my back, but you didn't, and now you're jealous because someone else does? The argument spiraled, their voices echoing in the loft's sterile expanse. James's frustration boiled over, his hands gesturing wildly. I'm losing you, and I don't know how to stop it. Then stop blaming me for your mistakes, Amara snapped, her voice raw. I've spent years trying to fit into your world, James. I'm done begging for a place in it. The silence that followed was deafening, their breaths heavy in the quiet. Amara grabbed her coat, her heart pounding. I'm going for a walk, she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. Don't follow me. She stepped into the night, the city's lights a blur through her tears. Marcus's words echoed. You deserve a life that feels like yours. And for the first time, she believed it. The loft, James, the marriage. They were pieces of a life she'd outgrown. As she walked, the wind carrying the scent of the bay, she felt the stirrings of freedom, a path forward she could finally see. Amara's footsteps echoed through the San Francisco night, the city's pulse a restless rhythm beneath her. The cool air stung her cheeks, drying the tears she hadn't meant to shed. The argument with James still burned in her chest, his jealousy, his desperation, the raw edge of a marriage fraying at the seams. She walked aimlessly, the neon glow of storefronts and the distant hum of traffic blending into a haze. Marcus's words from earlier lingered like a beacon. You deserve a life that feels like yours. They were a quiet revolution, urging her toward a truth she'd long avoided. The loft, with its glass walls and James's hollow promises, felt like a cage she was finally ready to leave. She found herself at a pier overlooking the bay, the water dark and restless under the stars. Leaning against the railing, she let the wind carry her thoughts. James had been her partner, her choice, but the reunion had exposed the fault lines in their bond. His silence, his failure to see her. Marcus, with his steady presence and shared scars, had shown her something else. A world where she didn't have to fight to be enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "You okay? Here if you need me." She smiled, her fingers hovering over the screen, but didn't reply. Not yet. Back at the loft, James paced the living room, the city skyline a mocking backdrop to his unraveling. Amara's words. "I'm done begging for a place in your world," cut deeper than any boardroom loss. He'd built an empire, but he'd failed her, and the weight of it was crushing. He sank onto the couch, his phone tempting him to call her, but he knew she needed space. Instead, he opened a browser, searching for articles on privilege, on systemic bias, on the things Amara had faced that he'd been too blind to see. Each word was a mirror, reflecting his shortcomings. He wanted to change, but was it too late? Amara returned at dawn, the loft quiet except for the faint hum of the city waking. James was asleep on the couch, his laptop open to an article titled, "Understanding Allyship." She paused, a flicker of surprise softening her resolve, but it wasn't enough to erase the hurt. She moved to the guest room, her sanctuary now, and began packing a small bag. Clothes, her laptop, essentials. She wasn't leaving forever, but she needed distance, a place to breathe. By mid-morning, she was at Marcus's apartment, a cozy space filled with books and framed articles, a stark contrast to the loft's sterile elegance. He opened the door, his eyes warm but concerned. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I haven't," she admitted, setting her bag down. "Things with James, they're falling apart." Marcus nodded, pouring her a coffee without asking. "Want to talk about it?" She did. Over steaming mugs, she poured out the argument. The way James's jealousy had twisted into blame. The way his promises felt like bandages on a wound too deep. Marcus listened, his presence a steady anchor, and when she finished, he leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. "You're at a crossroads, Amara. You don't have to choose today, but you're allowed to want more than what's breaking you." His words landed like a key turning in a lock. She sipped her coffee, the warmth grounding her. "I thought I could make it work with James," she said, "but I'm tired of fighting for someone who doesn't fight for me." Marcus reached across the table, his hand resting near hers, not touching but close. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Amara's heart stirred, but she pulled back, not ready to cross that line. "I need to figure out what's next," she said. "For me." He nodded, no pressure in his gaze. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The next week was a blur of work and solitude. Amara stayed at a friend's spare room, throwing herself into her cases, each one a reminder of why she'd become a lawyer. She and Marcus met often, their collaboration on community projects deepening their bond. They organized a fundraiser for youth scholarships, their shared passion a lifeline. One evening, as they sorted flyers in a cramped office, Marcus laughed at her meticulous notes, and she swatted his arm, their ease a stark contrast to the tension with James. James, meanwhile, was unraveling. He attended therapy, his sessions raw and humbling, peeling back layers of privilege he'd never questioned. He called Amara, leaving voicemails she didn't answer, each one a plea for a chance to prove himself. "I'm learning, Amara," he said in one. "I want to be the man you deserve." But her silence was an answer, and it terrified him. One night, Amara and Marcus attended a community gala, their presence a quiet statement. She wore a crimson dress, her confidence a fire rekindled, and Marcus stood beside her, his pride evident. As they danced, his hand steady on her waist, Amara felt a spark she hadn't known in years. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, a mirror of her resilience. "You're glowing tonight," he murmured, his voice low. She smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. "I feel like me again." The gala ended, and they lingered outside, the city's lights a canvas of possibility. Marcus turned to her, his eyes serious. Amara, I don't want to push you, but I care about you more than I probably should. Her breath caught, the weight of his words both thrilling and terrifying. Marcus, She paused, her heart torn between the safety of his presence and the chaos of her marriage. I need to close one chapter before I start another. He nodded, his smile bittersweet. I'll be here when you're ready. The next day, Amara met James at a neutral cafe, the air thick with the weight of their shared history. He looked worn, his eyes shadowed but earnest. I've been talking to a therapist, he said. I'm starting to see how much I've missed, how much I've hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me now, but I want to fight for us. Amara studied him, seeing the man she'd once loved, now humbled by his failures. But the spark was gone, replaced by a clarity she couldn't ignore. James, she said softly, I don't think I can be what you need anymore. And I know I need more than this. His face crumpled, but he nodded, accepting the truth. I'll always love you, he said, his voice breaking. I know, she replied, her eyes steady. But love isn't enough without trust. She left the cafe, the weight of her decision both heavy and liberating. The city stretched before her, alive with possibility, and for the first time, Amara felt the stirrings of a future she could claim as her own. Amara stepped out of the cafe, the San Francisco breeze carrying the faint tang of salt from the bay. The weight of her words to James, final, unyielding, settled in her chest, a mix of sorrow and liberation. The city pulsed around her, its rhythm a call to move forward. She'd closed a chapter, one written in duty and compromise, and now the blank page ahead felt both daunting and exhilarating. Marcus's confession from the gala lingered in her mind, a spark of possibility she wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of a life that could be hers, built on her terms. She returned to her friend's spare room, the small space a temporary haven. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Heard about a new community project in Oakland. Could use your fire? You in? She smiled, typing a quick, "Count me in," her heart lifting at the thought of their shared work. Their bond, forged in late-night talks and shared ideals, had become her anchor, a contrast to the hollow silences of her marriage. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of purpose. Amara threw herself into her advocacy, her courtroom arguments sharper, her speeches at community events fiercer. She and Marcus collaborated on the Oakland Project, a mentorship program for young activists, their days filled with planning sessions and their evenings with laughter over takeout. His apartment became a second home, its cluttered warmth a refuge. One night, as they sorted grant proposals, Marcus caught her humming a tune from the gala. Still glowing, I see, he teased, his eyes soft. She laughed, nudging his shoulder. Maybe I'm just happy. His gaze held hers, a question unspoken. Happy looks good on you, Amara. The moment shimmered, but she let it pass, her heart still navigating the space between friendship and something more. She wasn't rushing. Not after James, not after years of molding herself to fit his world. Marcus seemed to understand, his patience a quiet strength that made her feel seen. James, meanwhile, was grappling with his new reality. The divorce papers, delivered by Amara's lawyer, sat untouched on his desk, their starkness a rebuke. Therapy had opened his eyes to the privilege he'd wielded blindly, the ways he'd failed her by not seeing her struggle. He attended workshops on racial equity, each session a humbling mirror, but the work was solitary. His calls to Amara went unanswered, her absence a void he couldn't fill. One evening, he ran into Claire at a tech event, her smile as polished as ever. James, darling, she cooed, you look lost without her. He stepped back, his voice cold. I was lost with her, Claire, because of people like you and me. Her smile faltered, but he walked away, the encounter a final severance from his past. He wanted to be better, not for Amara's forgiveness, but for himself. Yet the realization came too late, a lesson carved in regret. Amara's life, in contrast, was blooming. The mentorship program launched with a vibrant event, the community center packed with young faces and proud families. She stood at the podium, her crimson dress a nod to the gala, her voice steady as she spoke of empowerment. Your dreams are your power, she told the crowd. No one can take that from you. Marcus in the front row clapped loudest, his pride a warmth she felt across the room. Afterward, they lingered outside, the night air crisp with promise. You were unstoppable up there, Marcus said, his voice low. I'm lucky to be in your orbit. She smiled, her heart stirring. I'm the lucky one. You've been everything these past months. His eyes searched hers, a quiet intensity in them. Amara, I meant what I said at the gala. I care about you, but I'll wait as long as you need. Her breath caught, the weight of his words both thrilling and grounding. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. I'm not ready to jump, she said softly, but I'm ready to walk towards something real. With you. His smile was radiant, a promise in itself. They stood there, the city's lights a backdrop to their unspoken vow, the future a canvas they'd paint together. Months passed, and Amara's divorce was finalized, the paperwork a quiet end to a chapter that had shaped her. She moved into a small apartment in Oakland, its walls filled with art and books, a space that felt like hers. She and Marcus grew closer, their relationship a slow dance of trust and joy. They traveled to community events, their shared mission a bond deeper than romance. One evening, as they watched the sunset from a hilltop, Marcus took her hand. This feels right, he said simply. It does, she replied, her heart full. James, now living alone in the loft, continued his journey of self-reckoning. He volunteered at community centers, his tech expertise helping fund programs like Amara's. He saw her once, at a fundraiser, her laughter with Marcus a pang he accepted. He nodded to her, a silent acknowledgement of her happiness, and she nodded back, a gesture of peace. Amara's work flourished, her voice a beacon for those silenced. She spoke at national conferences, her story of resilience inspiring thousands. Marcus was by her side, his career soaring, their partnership a force for change. They faced challenges, doubts, old wounds, but their shared history held them steady. One night, as they sat in her apartment, planning their next project, Marcus looked at her, his eyes bright. You've built something incredible, Amara. Not just out there, but here, he said, touching his chest. She leaned against him, the warmth of his presence home. We're building it together, she said. The city stretched beyond her window, its lights a map of battles won and dreams yet to chase. Amara felt the weight of her past, James, Claire, the reunion. But it no longer defined her. She was free, her heart open to a future where she belonged, not because she fought for it, but because she was enough. The Oakland Community Center buzzed with anticipation, its walls vibrant with murals painted by local youth. Amara stood at the podium, her crimson dress a bold slash against the evening's golden light filtering through the windows. The crowd, activists, families, and young dreamers, leaned forward, hanging on her words. We don't just survive, she said, her voice a steady fire. We thrive, because our stories are our strength. Applause erupted, a wave of affirmation that warmed her core. Marcus sat in the front row, his eyes bright with pride, his quiet nod a reminder of the journey they'd shared since that fateful reunion. Amara's heart swelled, not with the weight of the past, but with the promise of now. She stepped down, the crowd's cheers following her as Marcus met her at the stage's edge. You own that room, he said, his smile wide, his hand brushing hers in a gesture both familiar and electric. They'll be talking about you for years. She laughed, the soundlight, unburdened. Only if you keep writing about it, she teased, nodding toward his ever-present notebook. Their partnership had grown beyond projects, beyond friendship, into a rhythm that felt like home. They moved through the crowd, shaking hands, sharing stories, their presence a beacon for those who saw themselves in their fight. Outside, the California dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and violet, the air carrying the faint hum of the city. Amara and Marcus lingered by the center's entrance, the night stretching before them like an open road. You ever think about where we'd be if you hadn't walked back into that gym? Marcus asked, his voice low, reflective. Amara leaned against the wall, her eyes tracing the horizon. I'd probably still be fighting to fit into someone else's world, she said. Instead, I'm building my own. He nodded, his gaze steady. And it's a damn good world. Their laughter mingled with the breeze, a sound of ease and possibility. And Mara thought of James, of the loft that had once confined her, of the divorce papers that had set her free. The pain of that night at the reunion, Claire's cruelty, James's silence, had faded, not gone but no longer a chain. She'd forged a new path, one where she didn't need to prove her worth. Across the bay, James sat alone in his loft, the glass walls reflecting a city that felt emptier now. His journey of self-discovery had deepened, each therapy session peeling back layers of ignorance he'd once worn like armor. He'd started a foundation, channeling his tech wealth into community programs, many inspired by Amara's work. He'd seen her at the fundraiser months ago, her laughter with Marcus a quiet ache, but he'd accepted it. She was where she belonged, and he was learning to live with his regrets. Tonight he attended a lecture on systemic inequity, his notebook filled with questions, not answers. The speaker, a black woman with a commanding presence, reminded him of Amara, not in looks, but in fire. Afterward, he approached her, offering a donation to her cause. "It's inspired by someone I let down," he said, his voice steady but raw. She nodded, no judgment in her eyes, and he felt a small piece of redemption. Amara and Marcus drove back to her apartment, the radio playing soft jazz, the city's lights a constellation of dreams. Inside, her space was alive with color, paintings from local artists, books stacked high, a testament to a life she'd claimed. They cooked dinner together, Marcus chopping vegetables with a journalist's precision, Amara stirring sauce with a lawyer's focus. Their banter filled the room, a dance of familiarity that felt like forever. As they ate, Marcus set down his fork, his eyes serious. "Amara, I've been patient, but I need to say this. I'm in love with you. Not just the work we do, not just the past we share. You." Her breath caught, his words a spark igniting something she'd held back. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I love you too," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I was scared to say it, but I'm not anymore." The admission was a release, a bridge crossed. They leaned across the table, their kiss a promise sealed in the quiet of her kitchen. It wasn't rushed or reckless, it was a choice, rooted in trust and shared battles. They spent the night talking, planning, and dreaming of a future where their work and love could intertwine. Months later, Amara stood on a national stage, her speech broadcast to thousands, her voice a clarion call for justice. Marcus was there, his camera capturing her fire, his articles amplifying her message. Their partnership was a force, their love a foundation. They faced challenges, late nights, hard truths, the weight of their shared mission, but they faced them together, their hands clasped through every storm. James, watching the broadcast from his loft, felt a bittersweet pride. He'd lost her, but in doing so, he'd found a purpose beyond himself. He enrolled in a course on social justice, his tech empire now a tool for change, not status. He wrote Amara a letter, not expecting a reply, but needing to say it. "You showed me what courage looks like. I'm trying to live up to it." Amara received the letter, reading it in the quiet of her apartment. She felt no anger, only a quiet peace. She folded it away, her heart full with the life she'd built. Marcus called from the next room. "Ready for the next fight?" His voice was warm with challenge. She smiled, stepping toward him. "Always." The city stretched beyond her window, its lights a testament to battles won and those yet to come. Amara stood tall, her hand in Marcus's, her heart no longer tethered to the past. She was home, not in a place, but in herself, in the love they'd forged, in the world they were building. The road to the reunion had broken her open, but in its cracks, she'd found her strength, her voice, her future, and it was hers unapologetically. Amara's story, from the sting of betrayal at a reunion to the radiant dawn of her truth, is a testament to resilience. Through Claire's cruelty, James's silence, and Marcus's unwavering support, she carved a path where she didn't just survive, she thrived. Her journey speaks to anyone who's ever fought to belong, to be seen, to claim a life that feels true. James's late awakening, Claire's unyielding venom, and Marcus's quiet strength weave a tapestry of human flaws and triumphs, reminding us that growth often comes through pain and love through understanding. Amara's final stand, choosing herself, her voice, her future, lights a fire for us all to follow our roads, no matter how daunting. What did Amara's story stir in you? Did you root for her defiance, ache for James's regret, or find hope in Marcus's loyalty? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters in this shared journey. Where are you tuning in from, and what moment hit you hardest? Drop a comment, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep the conversation alive. Thank you for walking this road with us, for feeling every heartbeat of Amara's fight. Your presence makes this story more than words. It's a connection. Stay tuned for more tales of courage and truth, and until then, keep chasing your light. We'll meet again soon, ready for the next chapter.